Good morning, Brew Daily Show. I'm Toby Howell.
And I'm Ann Berry.
Today, the U.S. economy is increasingly reliant on the spending of the richest 10% of Americans.
And Apple, a $500 billion bet, investing big in America.
It's Tuesday, February 25th. Let's ride.
Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. 3 men who were accused of stealing a golden throne worth $3.5 million back in 2019 are standing trial in England this week, but it's not your typical golden throne because the throne in this instance refers to a toilet, or in my country's parlance, the loo. The loo. Yes, 6 years ago, thieves broke into an English country mansion where Winston Churchill was born and swiped the £215, 18-carat gold conceptual art piece in just under 5 minutes. At the time, the gold was valued at $3.5 million, but was insured for $6 million. Not your typical smash and grab, Toby.
It is not often that your booty is a place for booties in this case. Sorry, I had to. Ironically, this toilet was a conceptual art piece by the name of America from the artist Maurizio Catalan, meant to represent excess. If that name sounds familiar, Catalan is the same artist behind the banana peel duct tape, or the banana duct tape to a wall that sold for $6.2 million last year. Probably a little easier to steal a banana than a 215-pound golden toilet, but also harder to sell on the secondary market. So they stole America and they're selling it off for parts. There's some metaphor in there somewhere, but it is very funny that the loo in this case was the valuable thing that you wanted stolen. Now let's hear a word from our sponsor, LinkedIn Ads. And I used an espresso machine for the first time over the weekend.
Fancy. Was it a real one with all the bells and whistles, or this is more of an espresso vibe?
Oh, it was real, all right. I was getting my barista on. Unfortunately, I baristaed too hard and accidentally pulled multiple shots through the same coffee grounds. Did not taste all that good.
Okay, Toby, that's actually amateur hour. All the soluble compounds are already extracted, so you're using a waste product at that point.
See, I'm a rookie. Luckily, you never have to deal with a situation like that, though, if you use LinkedIn Ads. Thanks to its ability to filter your audience by industry, company, and role, you can avoid unwanted ad spend and unwanted ad waste.
Well, once you do figure out your espresso making game, Toby, maybe there's a LinkedIn ad campaign in your future to promote your product.
I'll leave that to the B2B marketers out there. If that sounds like you and you're interested in testing out LinkedIn Ads, LinkedIn will give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Just go to linkedin.com/MBD. That's linkedin.com/MBD. Terms and conditions apply only on LinkedIn Ads.
So for our first story, we have got Apple betting big on the future of American innovation as it announced plans to spend $500 billion in the US over the next 4 years. Included in that investment is also hiring an additional 20,000 people to help bolster its AI projects. The tech giant also announced plans to open a 250,000 square foot factory in Houston that they will develop with partners to make servers and power Apple Intelligence. The announcement comes as tech companies try to make good with the Trump administration, with tariffs from China looming. Now, if you remember, the Trump administration did put out there a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods earlier this month. Now, the 20,000 employees that Apple plans to hire in the US will be focused on research, engineering, and software and AI development, the company says. Meanwhile, in other Apple news, it is set to defend its DEI programs against critical investors during its shareholder meeting amid other major corporations axing its diversity pledges. Toby, there's an awful lot to unpack here, but it looks like CEO Tim Cook is deciding to spend dollars on building infrastructure on American soil to play ball with Uncle Sam. What are you thinking about this one?
I think that this is something that Tim Cook has done in the past. This is a playbook that Apple has run in the past. If you go back to Trump's first term back in 2018, they pledged to make $350 billion in direct contributions to the U.S. economy. That was to play ball with Trump, because what you are seeing under this administration is that they're threatening these tariffs. Tariffs have already been levied against China. And so Apple is saying our supply chain is very, sensitive to these tariffs. And so we should try to kind of reshore some of those operations, bring some operations back to the United States. And in doing so, hopefully skirt by and maybe avoid some of those tariffs that are being levied against, countries where it develops most of its products. So I think that for Trump, to him, this is another win for his tariff approach. He said in a speech to governors recently, Apple is going to build here instead because they don't want to pay the tariffs. And for Apple, it's just another instance of them, moving and grooving around this administration, saying, yes, we will play ball with you. We will invest in America in order to, try to avoid some of these punitive tariffs.
Yeah, so I feel like President Trump's definitely taking a victory lap on this one, but there are some parts of the Wall Street, Toby, that's asking, is this really a response to that, or is just kind of a logical business step? So when we take a huge step back, there's been a huge movement with tech companies to try and, for example, get their chip manufacturing back to the US. We've seen a ton of the big players talk about it. We've seen folks like Microsoft talking about investing more in the US, partly national security concerns, but partly also because, in a world where there's so much uncertainty, it feels as though people want to build in their own backyard. But I don't know. I feel like Apple's all over the headlines at the moment. I was really stunned, but to the positive, I was really excited by part of this announcement is to create an academy in Detroit to train small and medium-sized businesses in implementing AI. And I just thought that to me feels like a really solid investment in Michigan.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of this is something that aligns with AI. I mean, obviously, every investment you're going to hear about is going to have those two letters in it. Who knows how much will actually come of this, though, because, I mean, I mentioned that $350 billion it pledged in 2018. That really hasn't come to fruition that much. So part of this is maybe PR posturing like we've seen with people announcing these big investments, because if you go down the list, not all of these investments actually, come through. You have things like the Foxconn factory. That was a really big deal. This $10 billion high-tech campus in Wisconsin under Trump's first administration that never really materialized to the degree at which Foxconn kind of promised. But then you also have companies like Toyota and this U.S. steel producer Nucor, who did actually follow through and did invest $1 billion, built manufacturing plants in Kentucky that now do employ thousands of people. So is this going to be more of that PR bucket, or is this going to be actually an investment that you do see, bring jobs, bring investment to America? For the last few years, the American economy has been chugging along at a rate far exceeding its peers, but that engine is increasingly being powered by a single fuel source: rich Americans. According to new data from Moody's Analytics, the highest earning 10% of Americans, those households making $250,000 or more, are fueling the economy at unprecedented levels. Consumers in the top decile now account for nearly half of all consumer spending, the highest it's been since 1989. If you go back 3 decades ago, that number stood at just 36%, showing how much more dependent on rich people the economy is today than ever before. Two things are true at the same time. The finances of well-to-do have never been better. Their spending never stronger. Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's, told the Wall Street Journal. And the economy has never been more dependent on that group. And the U.S. economy has been very strong emerging out of the pandemic, maintaining higher GDP growth and lower unemployment than peer nations. But it's also in a precarious position given how reliant it is on wealthy people. It's created this odd sort of paradox: strong but delicate.
I looked at this and I asked myself, well, how did we get here? And I went down the rabbit hole, Toby. I'm a complete data nerd, and I'm also a markets person because Brew Markets is the franchise I look after here. I asked myself why. Back in January 2024, a year ago, there was a Fed survey that came out and said that the top 10% of Americans hold 93% of all stocks. Right, 93%. That was a year ago. And since then, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ markets were up over 20% in 2024. So I look at today and say, how is it that spending is so dependent on the wealthy in America? I'm like, because the wealthy just got even wealthier because they're investing. And I think that separation between spending, investing, saving, wealth creation, the divide is just getting bigger and bigger. Fascinating. Why?
Right. It is 100% related to the stock market, and it's also related to the housing market as well, because, richer people can afford houses. Housing values have just exploded over the past, few decades or so. So I want to dig deeper, though. Is this inherently a bad thing? Why is it a bad thing that, so much of our economy is powered by such a small portion of the country? It's not inherently bad, but it is risky because, say, there is a stock market sell-off, say home values do start to fall a little bit and the confidence of that top 10% begins to rattle, if that causes them to cut back on all this heavy spending that they're doing, that influences the economy because, again, consumer spending contributes 70% to GDP. So that would have a massive massive effect on the economy altogether. So if you start to see consumer sentiment start to slide in the top 10%, then it's going to affect the economy as a whole.
I do think there's risk to having this kind of concentration. And, there are a couple of data points I found really interesting. Walmart, did you see that recently, Toby, came out and said, we've got like 87% of folks earning over $100,000 are now shopping at Walmart. And I guess that would be a good thing if it means that you could see lower prices in places like that, which inures to the benefit of lower income folks. But I don't think we're necessarily seeing that because inflation's kept on going up, right?
You are right, too, to call out just how this affects companies and businesses. You are seeing this bifurcation in how businesses have been doing. If you look at companies that cater to people lower on the income spectrum, Big Lots filed for bankruptcy last fall. Kohl's, Family Dollar, those two businesses are closing stores left and right because there's just all this competition for fewer dollars down at the lower end of the income spectrum. But then if you look at the higher end of the income spectrum, Delta is killing it mainly on the backs of very high spend from business travelers. LVMH is, the biggest company in Europe. It kind of tosses that title back and forth between them and Novo Nordisk on the backs of this really intense luxury spending. So you see this bifurcation, not just across, where the spending is coming from, but the businesses that are attracting that spending. The top end are doing much better than the ones catering to the bottom end.
And just to build on that with one last thought, like back in, several years ago when I was investing, the conventional wisdom was, to your point, luxury will always do well because the rich will always figure it out. They'll be fine. The other place that people would invest was at places like Dollar General, like the dollar stores. And so, 2 years ago, I went and invested a bunch of money in the dollar stores thinking this bifurcation is going to play out. They've done terribly. To your point, we've seen the bankruptcies, but also Dollar General, folks like that, the share prices have not performed well. That old model of the poor are going to, the less wealthy are going to go to certain places just hasn't panned out. It's been that hard for people. So I think really worth keeping an eye on to see how this inequality sort of pans out from an economic perspective. Let's move on. Let's change gears a little bit, Toby. Let's talk about Greenpeace, which is our next story. We've got a pivotal trial taking place in North Dakota that could jeopardize the existence of the environmental group, Greenpeace USA. There's some real context here which is worth going over. The company behind the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline, Energy Transfer, tried to sue Greenpeace in federal courts back in 2017, alleging that the group's protesters who camped near construction sites for months cost the company $300 million. Now, the federal court ended up dismissing the case, but Energy Transfer filed a similar suit in state court, and that's where we are today with the trial. The issue that's underlying all of this sits with a small section of the pipeline that crosses near the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's reservation, where tribe members argue they were not consulted in the planning process and that the construction poses a pollution risk to sacred sites and to its water supply. Now, it should be noted that Energy Transfer disputes all of these claims. But Toby, this battle's had real messiness around it. Police and protesters have clashed. Protesters say they were pepper sprayed, and police officers say protesters threw rocks at them. The outcome of the trial, which again is focusing on Energy Transfer, saying all of this cost us in terms of this project, could have serious implications not only on the fossil fuel industry in showing what they're capable of doing, but also the environmental industry. I think the punchline here, when I really looked at the so what of the story, is if Energy Transfer wins, Greenpeace could be out of existence.
Right. That is the underlying fear here if you are an environmental organization, that this lawsuit is designed to silence free speech, because Greenpeace is obviously a much smaller organization than a company like Energy Transfer. Energy Transfer is alleging that, these protests cause physical harm to its employees, to its physical infrastructure. But Greenpeace is saying that this is existential for us. Like, we cannot bear to fight this lawsuit in a court. And so it sets a precedent against that could allow other, major corporations to target agencies and organizations that they disagree with and kind of essentially put them out of business through this threat of litigation. So that is the broader picture here. This case is what's known as a slap case. Slap cases are usually designed to, cost your opponents money, force them to spend all this time, all this money defending against the case. And you can tell this is a slap case because the actual financial damages Energy Transfer is seeking is not that significant. $300 million is a lot of money for Greenpeace, but for Energy Transfer, which generated $82 billion in revenue last year, it's not a massive financial portion. So their concern isn't really financial loss. They are trying to, basically turn public opinion and also try to squash similar protests against them. North Dakota is among 15 states that do not have anti-SLAPP laws, which makes it easier if you have an anti-SLAPP law, it makes it easier for these cases to get dismissed and then potentially recover some of the costs that these plaintiffs have that file them. So I do think that the fact that this is happening in North Dakota is important because of, the fact that there is no anti-SLAPP law there.
Critical digging. We'll keep watching this one.
Up next, it is time for Toby's Trends. It is Tuesday, which you guys know means it's time for a Toby's Trend. But for some, today is also the day after when an episode of White Lotus airs, where you might be digging into what weird thing that North Carolina family did this time around. I mentioned White Lotus, the smash hit from HBO, now in its 3rd season, because it's become a reliable driver of travel booms. Each season has taken place in a beautiful 4 seasons resort around the world. The first in Hawaii, the second in Sicily, and now the 3rd in Thailand. While it was difficult to quantify if season 1 drove an increase in travel to the already very popular Maui, the 2nd season had a much clearer cause and effect. One luxury operator told Bloomberg its Sicily bookings tripled after the finale of season 2. Another saw a 424% spike in sales. And now Thailand is hoping for a similar boom. Bookings at the $2,000 a night Koh Samui 4 Seasons resort have already jumped 40% according to the New York Times. And we're only 3 episodes into this season, Anne.
I know, I haven't watched it yet. Is that a terrible thing to admit?
It's not. There's a lot of good TV out there, but yes, continue.
There's so much good TV, and I'm completely the target for TV-driven destinations. I watched Shogun. Did you watch Shogun?
I did watch Shogun.
Devour Shogun. I could not book a flight to Japan fast enough after watching Shogun. So look, I get it. I'm a TV tourist too.
No, this is a real industry that has, popped up. It goes all the way back to, Lord of the Rings, where, people saw the Shire and immediately started booking their flights to, New Zealand. Jet setting in this case literally means jetting off to a set of a movie or a TV show. I think it's fascinating too that 4 seasons have really, capitalized it. They have a formal marketing partnership with HBO. So it's not, a coincidence that these shows keep taking place at 4 Seasons resorts. So they are kind of have this deal to market themselves as the real life version of the fictional White Lotus brand. So there is this promotional machine at play here for sure.
I mean, if the 4 Seasons is listening and they happen to want to do a promotional partnership with Morning Brew,
Please.
I think Toby and I would be very open to having that conversation.
I do think too, this is just a growing industry. We're seeing American Express, the card brand, is offering White Lotus Thailand experience packages to, certain card members. It includes a stay at the 4 Seasons resort. You can also do a 7-night White Lotus Thailand trip for just under $8,000 a person from another travel company. That includes private tours of Bangkok. That is what people are saying about this particular season. It's not just contained at the resort. It is broadening the world. You're going to other places in Thailand as well. So Thailand is kind of saying, yes, we're welcoming you guys with open arms, tourists, because right now the tourism is a little bit down from pre-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, they were getting 40 million visitors a year. That number fell all the way down to 28.2 million in 2023. It's back up to 35 million in 2024, and so they're hoping they can get, close that gap to 40 million that was flowing in pre-pandemic. Now let's sprint to the finish with some headlines you may have missed. Up first, the Starbucksissance is fully upon us. The struggling coffee company is laying off over 1,100 corporate employees and leaving several hundred positions unfilled as it aims to streamline its operations. Part of that effort also includes streamlining its coffee menu. 13 drinks are on the chopping block, including the iced matcha lemonade, the white hot chocolate, and whatever a chocolate cookie crumble creme frappuccino is. The strategic shift under new CEO Brian Niccol is all part of the effort to reduce wait times, focus on customer favorites, and revitalize the brand's core coffeehouse experience. And sometimes you got to cut the fluff in order to grow again.
I think that's right. And when are they going to fix their food offering? Do you know what I mean?
You're not a fan?
I'm not a fan. Every time I walk in there, it looks good. It tastes terrible. I think Starbucks, fix your food, and then you're on to your new chapter. Let's go on to our next headline, Toby. Lester Holt, the legendary newscaster and anchor of NBC's nightly news, is stepping down. Holt has been a mainstay for the evening program since 2015, but announced he plans to step away from the desk this coming summer. NBC executive Janelle Rodriguez called Holt, quote, the beating heart of his news organization, highlighting his steadying voice during the early days of the pandemic in 2020. At the time, the show was averaging 12 million viewers a night. Even though broadcast TV audiences have declined in recent years, nightly newscasts can still draw 20 million viewers on a good evening. Toby, look, trust can be the most valuable asset a news program can have. Lester Holt's been a trusted face for NBC for years. Is it going to be hard to replace Holt, or is this just the end of an era now for news?
It's a slow end of an era for sure, because you have seen a spate of high-profile news anchors stepping away from their posts recently. Just in the last few months, Joy Reid, she's leaving her position as the host of MSNBC. Her show was actually canceled by the network. Norah O'Donnell recently left her spot as anchor for CBS Evening News. And then Chris Wallace left CNN. Chuck Todd left NBC News. Hoda Kotb left NBC's Today. So we are seeing kind of these networks pull back on spending. They don't want to, hand out these hefty contracts to these faces of the network. And I do think we are just seeing a gradual but, sudden shift away from these, faces that we used to see all the time on network TV towards, more media news influencers like, podcasts like us. We are seeing just a shift happening over time. It is spring training time in Major League Baseball, and for the first time, MLB is allowing pitchers and batters to challenge balls in strike calls. But rather than adding another human into the mix, they found a neutral arbitrator, a computer. That's right, the league is testing out robot umpires with the hopes of adding them to the regular season eventually. Dubbed the automatic ball strike system, it allows players to challenge umpire decisions, adding a strategic twist to the game. The challenges can only come from the pitcher, catcher, or batter, and they must happen immediately, which so far has led to some pretty funny mix-up. Pitchers are horrible at it, said Dodgers pitcher Landon Knack. We probably had a 90% miss rate with all the pitchers last year. Dodgers catcher Hunter Fiducia chimed in. It is funny, Ann. As a player, you always think umpires are getting it wrong, but this is exposing it might be the opposite.
Hasn't this been happening in sports for years? Like tennis with the line calls. Hasn't this been happening in basketball? Why is this new news?
It's new news because baseball it's a slow-moving game. They didn't want to replace umpires. They think that it's moving to a fully automated strike zone. Got negative feedback from fans, oddly. I don't know. I think you are right. Baseball is just behind the curve in this instance. But I do think that this is the way sports are going, because it adds a lovely strategic element to the game as well, because remember in tennis too, you used to be able to challenge, line calls.
Yeah.
But now it's just all automated for at least most tournaments. Same thing is happening in baseball now, where some players just get way too caught up in the moment and challenge a call that is not even close to correct, but you're just like competitive and you I don't know, you just have a vendetta against the umpire. So a lot of players and teams are like coaching their players to say, only use them in high leverage situations, only use them when the outcome could affect the outcome of the game. Don't just do it because you're mad at the umpire here. So I think you are right, though, that baseball is a little bit behind the curve when it comes to, automated systems like this.
I think right there, I just got a window into how Toby plays sports. Like right there, like the strategic timeout, the high leverage point in the game.
It's important.
Whether it's your golf, your tennis, I think everyone, we just figure out how Toby plays mind games in his athletic pursuit.
True that. That is all the time we have for today. And thanks again for joining me while Neil is enjoying his White Lotus experience. Let's roll these credits. Emily Milliron is our executive producer. Raymond Liu is our producer. Olivia Graham is our associate producer. Uchenna Nwogu is our technical director. Scoops Dardaris is on audio. Hair and Makeup is pawning off a golden toilet handle. I wonder where they got that from. Devin Emery is our chief content officer, and our show is a production of Morning Brew.
Great show today, Toby, and we'll see you all tomorrow.